Hey there. I'm John Haber, Executive Secretary of New York Carolina Club, and we welcome all you alum from all over since we're virtual. And we have a great, we had such a great response, and we're so excited that you're all here with us with Bryan Tucker and Larry Weaver, who were classmates. Uh, Class of 93 at Carolina, and they actually started doing improv comedy, and they had actually a group called Selected Hilarity for about 7 years after they graduated from Carolina before they took their next steps in their on their still young careers. And Bryan, the New York Carolina Club honored in 2012 um, for his outstanding contribution to the arts. I'm proud to say he was a winner of what we call the Habey Award. And so that's when we first got to know Bryan among the Carolina alumni. And this is his 16th year as a writer on Saturday Night Live, having gone up the ladder with the Chapelle Show and Chris Rock Show. And actually coming up, Bryan is co-executive producer of a new sitcom called Keenan, with, meaning Keenan Thompson, that's going on NBC starting, I believe, February 26th. And also, Michael Che has a sketch comedy show that's going to be airing on HBO Max soon. And Bryan's going to make a few on camera. You'll see him occasionally on camera. And Larry, who's going to be moderating, and the two guys getting back together again. Larry has a background in, besides the sketch comedy with Bryan, that led to him being a motivational speaker and comedian and MC for meeting and events industry. And he's been featured on Dry Bar Comedy, Sirius XM Satellite Radio, Laugh USA, and countless other outlets. And I'm enough for me. I want to turn this right over to Larry and Bryan. Thank you guys for being with us, and let's get going.
Thank you, John. Appreciate it. Thank you all for being here tonight. I see in the chat we've got some love coming from Durham, North Carolina. I'm actually in Durham. Bryan is joining us from New York. We have a chat going and a Q&A going. If you have questions for Bryan, please put them in the Q&A, and you can upvote questions in the Q&A. So if you see a question you like, you can put a thumbs up or say you like it, and we'll make sure we get all the questions that people want answered, or at least most of them answered tonight. So be sure to use both the chat and the Q&A, but for your questions, please put them in the Q&A. Bryan, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, everybody. Glad to do this. And thanks to Larry, when John asked me who I wanted to, have like come and talk and be the MC, I thought of Larry, not only because he's a super good MC, but also because we're really good friends who've gone back. Gosh, I guess it's getting on 30 years.
It's been a while. It's been a while.
Yeah, we were both in each other's weddings. We toured around the country in a very sweaty little van together for 7 years, playing some of the top colleges and clubs across the country, and also some health club racquetball courts and other things.
Yes.
So yeah, Larry and I have been friends for a while. So thanks, Larry.
Thank you, Bryan. Well, let's start out with some news. Can you tell us when the next episode of SNL is?
Yes, not this
Are you
Saturday,
allowed?
but then Not this Saturday, but the next Saturday. And then we're going to have 5 in a row. We've been having long breaks and then a lot in a row. In the fall, we had 6 in a row, and the most we've ever had in a row in my 16 years there has been 4. So it's been a lot and then nothing, and a lot and then nothing.
Is that it must have something to do with the pandemic, maybe the testing? Is that the reasoning?
I guess so. I think they wanted to wait and give everybody a break, and also give people time to quarantine in between. There's really hard COVID testing there. We get tested every single day that you're in the office. We go in the office a lot less, but we go back to the studio for rehearsal. We're there Saturday night. If you have a sketch on, you're there. And sometimes we come in to collaborate with each other, but mostly it's stuff like this through Zoom.
Are you allowed to tell us any upcoming guest host or musical guests?
I am not allowed.
Okay, no problem.
Not until they officially announce it. And the truth is, I know one, but I don't even know the other 4.
No problem. Also coming up on February 16th, I believe, the debut of Keenan on NBC. Is that correct?
Yep. We've been working on that for, gosh, the better part of 2 years. It was supposed to come out in the fall, but because of COVID, it didn't happen. But they're shooting 10 episodes. We've already shot 3 or 4 in Los Angeles, and that'll be out in February 16th on NBC.
And you're co-executive producer. That's pretty exciting. It's a big step for you.
Yeah, I've written on other like half-hour shows before, but never like a real like half-hour sitcom.
Yeah, it's exciting. Now, this show's been in the works, like you said, for a couple of years. I think at one point, Chris Rock was tied to it as executive producer. It's been some changes in casting. What can you tell us about the show, the cast, and what to expect?
The better 15, 16 years at SNL. So when he got his own show, he brought me in to help.
I think I may have talked over you there for a second.
Oh, that's okay. I was just saying, Keenan and I have known each other for a long time, and if you see something on SNL that stars Keenan, there's a pretty good chance that I had something to do with it.
Yeah. Why don't you rattle off some of those sketches that? What's up with that is one. Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah. What's up with that? What up with that? Black Jeopardy, Family Feud. Update characters like LeVar Ball and things like that. And then lots of like different one-off sketches. We've been doing a bunch of stuff together.
Yeah, you started at SNL in 2005, and Keenan was that season he was promoted from featured player to main cast. And so, did you hit it off right away?
Yeah, I mean, when you come to SNL, you kind of the new people gravitate towards the new people because everyone there is trying to figure out how to get on the show and how to basically not get fired there. So the new people all kind of stick together and try to be a group, and it's always good when you can find someone who matches your sensibility and you form a partnership. And so, Keenan had been there a little over a year, hadn't quite found someone who was writing regularly for him. And I saw in the read through, he was always super funny. He just knew how to nail things right away because he had enormous experience already on television. And I was like, oh, this guy's not only funny, but also his comedy is kind of the comedy that I like. And also we just got along as friends. So we started writing stuff together and, got a few things on, but probably What's Up With That, which maybe was 2009, was like our first thing where like people were like, oh yeah, like Keenan can be a star on the show. So.
Yeah, and you started in season 31, and the featured players that year were fantastic. Andy Samberg, Bill Hader, Kristen Wiig, Jason Sudeikis, and I would say, just from my interaction with some of those, that they're a very, very polite, nice group of people. Did that help make the transition to SNL easier, being with these people that were so friendly and genuine?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm still friends with all those people. I got very lucky in terms of the class that I was in. It was all those people you mentioned in the cast who all went on to be, basically big stars: Kristen Wiig, Sudeikis, Bill Hader. Sandberg. And then the two writers they hired that year were me and Colin Jost. So I came on with a super strong class. Everyone, was good, and that because they were all good, that also helped me, in that I was working with them and writing with them. So I like to say that out of that class of 2005, I'm the least successful member of that class. Not because I don't consider myself successful, I definitely do, but I'm one of the only ones who's not like a movie star or married to Scarlett Johansson. So
yes, well, you're not done yet. You're not done
yeah,
yet.
it's a high bar.
So that class and that year, I know going into the year, Lauren, as he often says, he's going to make changes. And going into the season 31, he had announced that there will be some changes made. Do you know, maybe you were never told this, but just looking back, I know a lot of times writers and cast members are put in a certain slot. Do you think you were brought in to fill some certain position or slot?
Yeah, there's always hope of what people want. I had written for Chapelle Show, and Neil Brennan, who was the co-creator of that show with Dave Chappelle, knew Seth Meyers very well, and they were friends. And Seth said, when Chapelle Show kind of blew up in 2004, Seth said, "Are there any Chapelle Show writers that you would recommend?" And Neil recommended me. There weren't very many Chapelle Show writers anyway. And so they brought me in, kind of hoping, to be blunt about it, that I would write for the Black cast members that they had, because I had written for Chris Rock and for Dave Chappelle. They had Keenan on and Vanessa Mitchell on, and people weren't really writing a lot for them. And so they put me in an office with Keenan Thompson and with Vanessa Mitchell and JB Smoove, who was another writer on the show. And then right next door was Keenan. And so they kind of group everybody, together, hoping they'll get along and, work together. And we did.
It worked, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you remember going back to your days at stand-up? You moved to New York in '97. I think you were 25 at the time. And you have described those 2 years when you were doing open mics and hamburger joints and different things as some of the toughest years of your career. And you rarely describe them in glowing terms, but
right.
You're out there. Do you remember the first time you met Neil Brennan?
I don't remember the first time, but those years were times where you and I were in a group together. We had some pretty good success in terms of we were touring all over the country and making a living at it for about 3 or 4 years. And then when I moved up. Suddenly I lived in a fifth floor walk up with 3 other roommates, and I was temping and starting over. And it was super hard. But gradually, I would play at little open mics in small places around New York. And in doing that, you would meet the other comedians who were also playing. And so you got to know like a small community of comedians who kind of became your friends and became the people who you relied on for your morale. Like you would show up at a show and it would be, maybe 5 or 10 people, but because you had a couple friends there that you could share it with, it helped. And Neil was one of those people, at least a little later, that was showing up at those places. I think we met at a place called Ye Olde Triple Inn, which was like a rowdy restaurant on 54th Street that had comedy every Wednesday night at 10:30, and it was a lot of drunk people yelling, and the MC sang, which was kind of fun. But I remember the comedy could be good there, but it was very loud and rowdy.
Well, the reason I bring that up, some of the questions we had in advance were about advice you would give to, aspiring people that want to be on SNL. And, is stand-up a good route? Is improv a good route? And you've done both of those things. And,
yeah,
I think a lot of times you do not speak too fondly of those days, but those are the days that you met people and you made contacts that went on to be very influential in your career, even though at the time you didn't realize it.
That's a good point. Yeah, I mean, those years definitely are not fun, but they were crucial. They were the time that I learned to basically hone my own voice in stand-up, which is so important. And then later when I was, and we haven't gotten to this part yet, but around 1998, about a year and a half in, I started faxing in jokes to David Letterman.
Yeah.
Um, and, that was a time where I just started writing jokes for other people, which I'd never done before. And I would have to write 10 to 15 jokes a day for David Letterman, and fax them in. And that also was incredibly important because it taught me, how to write in another person's voice. So, those times were hard, but when I look back on it, they were the necessary steps that kind of got me, to where I am today. It's just hard to go through it.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to jump around. I'm not really following a very linear format
Okay.
this time. We're jumping around from period to period. But yeah, you went to Carolina. You started in '89. You were 17, I guess, when you started. You were there for 4 years. We formed a group and toured around, then moved to New York. And then, you kind of did the stand up around for a while. And then you did, I think John mentioned a few of these things. In order, let's see, you did you faxed into Letterman, and then what was next?
I faxed into Weekend Update too to Norm Macdonald and
Weekend Update, yep.
Colin Quinn.
Yep.
And then my first job was on Chris Rock show.
Chris Rock, right, right. And then from there, Mad TV, Tough Crowd, Chapelle Show, and SNL. By the way, do you know what today is, Bryan?
No.
Today is January 21st.
Is that the first day Selected Hilarity ever performed?
No, it's not. But it's actually
Scott Brown's birthday?
No, today is a huge, this is fun Bryan Tucker trivia. Today is a huge day in your history. You're going to be, I think, excited to hear this. January 21st, 2004, 17 years ago today, season 2, episode 1 of Chappelle Show aired. And on that episode was a skit called Racial Draft.
Right.
Which I would say solidified you as one of the great comedy writers of our time.
Well,
and also paved the way for your success since then. So that was 17 years ago today on January 21st. Tell us about Racial Draft.
All right. Wow. That was quite an intro. I appreciate it, Larry. That was a sketch. So I was writing on Tough Crowd with Colin Quinn, which was this show that came on after Jon Stewart's Daily Show on Comedy Central, where maybe a lot of you who are on this Zoom have seen it, but comedians sit around and they talk about the day's events. But then there's one little part later in the show where Colin does some kind of it's not necessarily a sketch. It's kind of a monologue with some extra props and help. And we had to write ideas for that every week. And I wrote something for him called the Race Draft, because Colin had said on his show, one of the Black comedians who was talking to him was, saying, Jason Kidd being a Black man. And Colin was like, he's not Black, he's white. And Jason Kidd was half Black, half white. And Colin was like, we claim him. And the other comedian was like, nah, man, he's Black. And so that got me thinking, oh, you know what, we should settle this once and for all. And so I pitched Colin, we should have a race draft. And Colin was like, yeah, I pictured it that, he would, it's not like a big announcement, like a sketch, that he would just show who got who. And Colin was like, it's funny, but I don't quite, know. And then a month later, I was sending in, freelance stuff to Chappelle because I knew Neil Brennan, who had started it with Dave. And I thought, oh, that could be a good sketch for Chappelle. And then you could make it a real thing, where it would look like the NBA draft and you could have announcers and stuff like that. And so I asked Colin, do you mind if I send in this idea? And he was like, yeah, we're not going to do it. So I sent it in to Chappelle with, another 10 other ideas. And they were like, we like this race draft thing. And so they asked me to write up the script, and I wrote up, a draft of the script and sent it in. And then basically they take it from there. I was working on another show. So I got to see them editing it, but I never went to the shoot of it or, anything like that. And the first time I saw it fully formed was I guess what you said, 14 years ago today, 16 years ago today.
17, yes.
17 years ago, right.
It was, very influential skit. If you Google top comedy sketches of all time, there's different lists from Mashable and Rolling Stone and different ones, and likely that skit will be near the top. It's a very,
It's
very well-known sketch.
always on those lists, which is nice. I mean, I will say, it's I think it's a great idea. I'm really proud of it, but it's also a consequence of just writing for 20 years. I've been employed writing. I've written on. I need to look, but I think it's up to like 650 SNLs. And when you write that often, that much, sometimes you hit a home run. So, a lot of other times you don't. But it is a part of it is a consequence of just constantly getting stuff on TV, and some things just are inspired every now and then, but often not so much. You just got to keep trying.
Yes, absolutely. And that led you to being a writer, the third ever writer on Chapelle Show behind Chappelle and Neil Brennan. You were the third to bring in on midway through season 2.
Right. Yeah. I wrote stuff for them like freelance, even in the first season, even for the pilot. But they didn't actually like hire me as a writer until Tough Crowd with Colin Quinn got canceled, and then I was available, which was midway through season 2.
Great. Well, we have a question in the Q&A, which kind of relates to what you just said about writing. What did you study at UNC?
Yeah, you and I, we should talk about our Carolina, since it's a Carolina thing, we should talk about
I
our
know.
Carolina.
Well, we're going to do that right now.
All right.
What did you study at UNC, Bryan?
I studied journalism. I was a broadcast journalism major. I came to UNC from Richmond, Virginia, or just outside of Richmond, Virginia, thinking I would be a journalist. I always loved comedy, but I didn't think that was a viable career. I did stand up once when I was in high school on a dare. And then when I came to Carolina, I just wanted to get involved in comedy. So I joined the student television station, where I met Larry and some other people who we worked on a sketch show called Off the Cuff together, which I started, my very first week at Carolina. And I ended up working on Off the Cuff all 4 years. And because of the people I met on that show, we were all comedy fans and performers. And Larry was part of Off the Cuff. And we used to we did like a stand-up contest where we were all in a contest together. And one of the members of our group won, not me and not you, but another one. But we all, liked and admired each other and our comedy. And Larry had the idea of, each of us have like 10 to 15 minutes of decent stand-up. Let's all get together, 5 of us, and put together like a group. And so we did our first show my sophomore year, maybe, in the basement of Morrison Dormitory. Does that seem right?
I think it was your freshman year, yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah, maybe spring of my
The first show was
year.
in Burlington at the July 4th celebration, I think, officially.
That's right. Wow.
But there may have been some earlier shows, yeah.
Yeah, outdoors at like 3 p.m, right? Yeah. Right. Yeah. So people got like, a funnel cake and walked by as we did comedy.
Absolutely.
But then, we did comedy in around UNC while I, took classes in journalism. And other things. And then, slowly we started doing more shows, mostly for our friends and, smaller places. We started doing them around town. If you went to Chapel Hill in the 90s, in places like the Skylight Exchange and the Hardback Cafe and, things like that. And then also the Cabaret and the Great Hall. We did 2 really big shows in the Great Hall, which, eventually we got a student audience, and then we kind of got, a local audience, around the Raleigh-Durham Chapel Hill area. And then we started, playing, the finest, like small comedy clubs in Durham and steakhouses in, like Wilmington. We started making a little money at it. And then by my senior year, I kind of had a choice to make of, I thought, well, should I try and go into journalism, or should I try to keep this going? And the 5 of us all agreed, let's give this a shot. This is a great time in our lives to do that. And we did. We got a college booking agent who booked us at colleges, and we toured around the country again in a van with a Sega Dreamcast in it. And we played, how many shows would you say, Larry? 450?
I really don't know. Several hundred for
Yeah,
sure.
somewhere
Sometimes we went
between
on for weeks
350
at a
and
time.
450.
Yeah.
Yeah, mostly at colleges, mostly small shows, but we also played, Catch a Rising Star in New York and Carolines, and we played the Improv in Los Angeles, and we opened for a few notable people, and that was a great run. And what it gave me, in my career now is, first of all, it taught me how to write sketch and taught me how to be a performer, and um, but it especially made me a lot more seasoned when I moved up to New York. So when I would do the, terrible open mic at 11:30 at night at a coffee shop, I was still pretty good because I'd already done all these shows. And so that gave me an advantage so I could kind of hit the ground running when we came to New York.
Yeah, and I want to circle back to one of the things that you said that sort of related to the question that Samantha said, and we got some off the cuff people in the chats here. It was Philip Brown's here.
Represent,
Hi, Philip.
represent.
Donna O'Quinn. Got some good old folks here. Good to see you. Thanks for coming. But off the cuff, the name off the cuff. It was a student television show, and the name off the cuff sort of implied that it was poorly put together and not scripted and
Yes.
just done on the fly, which it was. But
Yes.
you, Bryan Tucker, actually wrote scripts. You didn't
Yes.
have to. Nobody else did, but you wrote scripts.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I mean, I wanted to make it just a little bit more professional than it was. A
And it
lot
was
of it
work. It
was
was
like,
practice.
let's go to timeout, and I'll pretend I'm Elvis ordering a chicken biscuit. We'll shoot that. But I kind of was, I was a big fan of sketch. I was a big fan of SNL and Monty Python, and In Living Color back then. And so I wanted to write sketches. So I came up with ideas and I wrote scripts and passed them out and stuff. And, we tried to do it a little bit more professionally. It was still uh, like, the equipment we shot it on was crazy. These enormous
True.
heavy cameras and these
Yes.
packs that we carried. And yeah, it was a different time.
Yes, and I have in my notes here, you did a show at a club called Players with a Ken Jung. Is
I
that
did. I
correct?
did. Yes, indeed. Yes. Dr. Ken, they used to call him.
Yes, Dr. Ken.
Yes.
Very good. Good
Yes.
times. Those were good times.
They were good times. Do you remember we were such a big hit around town that he opened for us. And
I
he
think he
was a
got the last laugh.
I know he did. He was a student in Duke Medical School.
I'll be
We
at Players
still held
next week, by
against
the
him.
way. Well, I appreciate you saying all those nice things about selective hilarity. And some of the articles I've read, I've taken umbrage at your dismissive tone of your early years. But as you said, we did play Catch a Rising Star. Some of the big clubs. There's actually a great documentary about the Melrose Improv there in Hollywood, and all these people that grew up going to the improv and dreamed of playing there. And we just walked right in our early 20s, and all these clubs, Comedy Cellar, which is a big deal. And I don't think we understood at the time how big of a deal some of these things we were doing. Everything was moving so quickly at that age. But yeah,
Yeah.
we were in our early 20s, and every time we would go to one of these clubs, the industry people would come out. It was an exciting time, and I appreciate
Yeah.
you saying those nice things.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm very proud of Selected Hilarity. I think if you heard me in other places, like say, I think it's because we were like five kind of young looking dudes in khaki pants, kind of doing things that were a little wacky, sometimes. And I think if you saw a picture of it or you looked at it back then, it would feel a little dated, I guess is what I worry
That's
about.
all my doing.
I mean, mine too.
I
We
take responsibility for that.
we decided to put on the khaki pants and like the polka dot ties because we thought it would make us look older. So
And well, we also at the time the college market, and I think it still is very clean cut, very
right.
politically correct, and it worked. We were a huge hit on the
Yeah,
college market, so success was had with the khaki pants.
it's true. It's true. I mean, yeah, you're right. And we knew that to make a living at comedy at age 22, 23 was very rare. And, but I don't think we understood, when we were playing like the comic strip and going to a meeting with CBS the next day. I don't think we understood like that we were very lucky to have that happen.
Right. And just going back to your college years, You were studying broadcast journalism. Did you take some RTVMP too? The defunct radio, television, motion pictures
A
school?
few, not many, frankly.
Yeah.
I think RTVMP, it's funny, like the early to mid 90s was when it was starting to fade away a little bit, I think.
I think there was some scandal, but we won't get into
Well,
that.
I don't know.
The dark history of RTVMP.
Yes,
That's for another chat another day. But
yes.
anyway, also, if I recall during this time, you would actually write spec scripts for TV shows, which I don't know if you did anything with them, but I seem to recall you writing a script for The Simpsons. And were these class assignments or just something you did on your own?
No, that's just something I wanted to do. Uh, Again, in Selected Hilarity, my main role was I was the writer. I wasn't the best performer, you know, I wasn't, all that good at, promoting us and marketing us. But what I was probably best at among the five of us was, the ideas and the writing of it. And so that made me think, oh, you know what, I should be a writer. That should be my role. And so if I'm going to be a writer, then I need to like write. I need to like try and write like a TV writer would. So I wrote like spec scripts for The Simpsons and I guess later Malcolm in the Middle and stuff. Which when I moved to New York and I had those in my hand, if I had a meeting with someone, I could be like, here's, how about this? I rarely had a meeting when I moved to New York, but if I ever did, I had it ready. I also just wanted to like practice, so I did stuff like that.
Well, let me ask you this: back when we were in school, there was no Ethernet. There were a couple computer labs. They were very rarely used.
Yeah.
How did you even know how to write scripts? Where did you learn it? And how did you learn the formatting and the actual process of it?
Um, I definitely took a screenwriting class at Carolina
Okay.
where we wrote us at least the first like 30 pages of a sample screenplay.
Okay.
And we studied screenplays, and then I got books. I got like I was so pleased when I got a book of all the scripts from Monty Python,
Ah,
and they were all
yes.
in the format. And I remember reading that whole thing and kind of trying to write one of my own.
The formatting is very important. That's a good point that people don't bring up very often, but actually writing the scripts out. Back then, they were not typewritten, but they were done in
Yeah,
the dot matrix printer, and they were spaced out
you'd
a
say
certain
them into a
way.
dictaphone, and then you would give it the dictaphone to your secretary.
No, but there's a
So,
format to scripts, and it's a part of writing that needs to be learned. Is that right?
definitely.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think making your script look professional is certainly a huge part of it. I was co-head writer on SNL for several years, and one of the jobs of that was you get submissions from people that want to be writers, and you have to read anywhere from 80 to 300 submissions. It's a lot, and so one thing that will definitely knock you right away is if you pick up a script and it just looks like it's just not very professional, and this person doesn't know, even like how to format it, that it looks like a real TV script. Immediately, even if it's pretty good, immediately that's a strike against it in your head.
Great. Well, I'm going to answer. I'm going to ask some more SNL questions here. I think some people in the chat and Q&A want to hear some good stories. So we'll come back to writing and back to UNC and back to Chapel Hill. But just for a little bit of diversion here, what's a guest from SNL that really, really impressed you, either recently or in your 15, 16 years there,
Um,
or maybe surprised you and their ability, or just caught you off guard how good they were?
yeah, sure. I mean, Dwayne The Rock Johnson, when he first hosted, I think this was before he's probably the biggest movie star out there right now. But he hosted maybe in, I don't know, 2007, 2008, maybe. And he might have even hosted before I was there in 2004. But I remember him coming and being really professional, really funny, knowing exactly what to do. When you host SNL, everybody writes a whole bunch of scripts, and then you read them all out loud on Wednesday afternoon in front of everybody. And then they decide out of all those scripts, which ones they're going to pick to put on the show, or at least to go to dress rehearsal. And so it's really hard for a host to just come in and have to read 40 different things. They're in probably 35 of them. And they have to do, a different kind of character in each one. And, I thought, well, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson is fun, but he's just kind of he's a wrestler. He's not necessarily like an actor. But he was, he just knew how to be funny in all of them, stayed within himself, and was just, fun. And so that, told us, I think, a little bit, that, oh, like, this guy knows what he's doing and he's going to go on to bigger things.
Yes, and he did. And speaking of The Rock, I think you mentioned perhaps that the Keenan show is debuting with The Rock's new show, which I believe is called Young Rock. Is that right? Are they back to
Yeah.
back?
Yeah, Young Rock's at 8 and Keenan is at 8:30. I don't know anything about Young Rock, but looks fun, I guess.
It's about his career. His dad, of course, a professional wrestler, and it's about his career growing up. His dad moved around the country, and yeah, just a lot of wacky antics, I think. And
Gotcha.
Rock at different ages is represented in the sitcom. I know that The Rock will promote his show very, very heavily and put all of his money and resources behind it. So that's only good news for Keenan.
That's a good point. Yeah, and people love The Rock. So, if we can ride off the wake of that show, then I'm glad to do it.
Absolutely. Someone asked a very good question. They wanted to know how you became a prominent writer for Black voices. Now, before I ask that question, I want to touch on criticism of SNL over the years, that you have not been diverse as you could be. And I know that in the past year or two, you've put out a lot of diversity initiatives, some scholarships, and some partnerships with some other theaters to increase the pool of qualified diverse candidates and to give them a direct pipeline to SNL. So can you tell us a little bit about the diversity initiatives and maybe what your role is in that?
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing like NBC has some diversity initiatives that
Okay.
SNL is part of.
Okay.
There's nothing from SNL of like, we are going to hire a Black cast member this year. We're going to hire an Asian cast member. That mandate is never set out. But there are things of, NBC is having a sketch diversity showcase with, lots of different diverse people, and SNL is going to be a part of that. Or NBC is having a writers diversity workshop, and two of those people will submit to SNL, stuff like that. So it's kind of working in conjunction with NBC. But I think in general, just as things have gone on in the last 20 years, it's just become more important to the powers that be, that SNL, Lorne Michaels and the other producers that our show, have many different types of people, not only for appearances, but because it just gives us a lot more opportunity to write for different people. I was so glad when they cast Sashir Zameda, as a Black woman on the show, because then I could write, like a Beyonce sketch or an Oprah sketch, or, it just opened up the world, for so many other sketches. And now, we had Leslie Jones and now Ego Wodum, and, and now, we have Bowen Yang, and we can write, something about, Kim Jong-un, it just helps in terms of like, it opens up our ideas a lot more. We're not put in a box of like, okay, well, we have, 8 white guys and 6 white women, and we have to kind of keep within the parameters of what that is. So, I mean, I would say, not only is it good for, again, just kind of a, like, a PR way, but it's also, it's just good for a practical way. And so I'm very glad that we have a good diverse cast. And I think also Keenan helped that along. Keenan kind of coming up and being a bit of more of a star on the show, helped open doors for people like Jay Farrow and Chris Redd and Michael Che. Things are definitely more diverse than they have been in the past at SNL, and still working on it,
Yeah,
but improving.
absolutely, absolutely. Do you recall the first rap album that really caught your attention?
In my whole life,
Yeah, way back in the day, back in probably high school, I guess.
yeah. I mean, it's probably like, Cool Mo D or something. Like I was into like I was into like hip hop in like sixth grade, which is like
Sixth
to
grade.
me
Okay.
for me is like 1981. Um, and I guess just maybe to go back to the why have you been writing for Black comedians so much? I think another reason is because I grew up on shows like the Jeffersons and Good Times and Sanford and Son. Like I watched all those shows when I was growing up, and so and in the 80s when I was in my formative comedy years, Eddie Murphy was so cool and important. And we got the little Delirious cassette and listened to it in our bedrooms, without our parents um, knowing. And that was the time in my life where comedy was so cool and a little bit dangerous in some ways. And so I think subtly that influenced the kind of comedians that I wanted to write for and the kind of comedy that I liked. But in general, I write for everybody. I wrote a thing for at our last show for Melissa Villaseñor, and for the host every week. It's not the only thing I write, but I definitely it's in my sensibility to write that stuff.
Absolutely. Well, you have been known for that, and sometimes people, when they speak of you, mention that. I think it's been other cast members who have been interviewed say that about you, and partly because you wrote for Chris Rock and you wrote for Chappelle and you wrote for you're such good friends with Keenan, and part of that's because you're very talented and you're good, and they like Chris Rock especially. I imagine wants whatever's funny. I imagine that's what he wants on the show.
Yeah, and I remember that's you reminded me of that. One of the things that Chris Rock told me. Chris Rock was my first job, like I said, on HBO, and I never had a full-time job in television. And I was very nervous coming in there into the show. And I didn't want to ask Chris, like, well, what should I write? Because that just seems like a stupid question. So I asked him, what should I not write? What should I avoid? And he thought for a minute. He was like, well, don't write black. Just write it funny and I'll make it black, which was a really good thing to hear and understand in my first week there. And that's kind of what I've been doing. I can write about Black culture and about what's going on, but I never necessarily like try to write black. That's always a bad idea. You just you have the idea, and then you give it to the person and they put it in their own voice. And that's not only true for Chris Rock, it's true for whoever we have hosting SNL every week. We had when one week I'll be writing for like Lake Shelton, and then the very next week we'll write for Kevin Hart. And like those are very different voices, and you kind of have to figure it out. If you have a fun idea, you have to figure out how they would fit and their voice would fit into it.
Yes, well, another reason you may be typecast for that is you're perhaps best known. This may be, as far as people stopping you on the street and coming up to you in a restaurant, you may best be known for being in a skit called "I Know Black People." Would you say that's true?
Yes, that's true. Yes.
And you did very well on that sketch. That sketch was a Chappelle Show sketch, sort of a game show. And was it real in the sense that you didn't know the questions at the time?
Yes, they quarantined us. They put us like almost like a jury. They put us in separate rooms so that we couldn't hear what was going on. And then we were brought out one by one, and Dave asked us questions that only the Black community, people in the Black community would know, So, but I guess I had some advantages in that, I was already writing for that show. Dave and I were kind of, co-working friends and knew each other. So at least I was comfortable and knew his sensibility. So that was, yeah, that was shot in 2004, probably still once a month. I get someone coming up to me on,
Yeah.
somewhere and saying, I saw you in that thing, It also
Haven't
helped when
changed.
Netflix put Chappelle Show back on for like a month. So
Yeah. Well, let's go back to SNL. Circle back there. Let's talk about if you go to SNL's YouTube page and you go to all their videos from all the years that they've uploaded, and you sort them by popularity. The top 10 has several Bryan Tucker skits. At the top of the list, near the top, is a sketch called Black Jeopardy with Tom Hanks. Tom Hanks, one of the biggest stars on the planet, did a great job last night at the Celebration of America. Tell us about that sketch. It's one of your best known sketches. I know you co-wrote it with Michael Che. Tell us about it, and tell us about working with Tom Hanks, and give us a little background information on it.
sure. Whenever someone asks me, what sketch in SNL are you most proud of, or would you say this is what I wrote? That's probably the one I would say, just because it brought two different groups of people together, in a way that almost no other sketch I've been a part of has. That sketch was shared by both like the Ebony magazine website and the Rush Limbaugh show. It was like one of the very few things, in America where people on both sides, kind of came together and was like, this is funny. So I was very proud of that. That was like I think our fourth Black Jeopardy that we did. We were a little exhausted from doing Black Jeopardies. We had done one with Louis C.K. and Elizabeth Banks and Drake, and then we hadn't done one in like a year. And then when Trump was running, this was right before the election, like 2 weeks before the election, 2016. I had said to Che, like, like a lot of the things that these Trump voters, these ideas that Trump voters have, you can kind of see them overlap in the Black community. They don't really trust the system. They're not crazy about like there's stuff about like voting in there that they're not really trust, don't really trust. And I was like, oh, what if Tom Hanks comes on as a Trump voter and then he's good, like he gets all the stuff. And Michael Che loved that. And we had written the first three together. And so we sat down and wrote that. And Tom Hanks, when he first read it, he really liked the idea. When he first read it, he did it as kind of like a Midwestern Dan Aykroyd kind of guy, like, nice to be here. But then slowly, we rehearsed it again on Friday, and then rehearsed it on Saturday afternoon. And each time he got a little bit better about it and found it more. And then when they put that MAGA hat on him, like he found it even more. And even during rehearsal in the sketch, Keenan walks over to Tom to congratulate him for liking Tyler Perry movies because he says, if I can laugh and pray in 2 hours, then that's a good movie. And Keenan goes over to shake his hand, and Tom Hanks kind of flinches and goes away. And Keenan's like, no. And that was kind of something we found in rehearsal. And so it was a good sketch that slowly got better and better and better. And I'm so grateful that Tom Hanks was hosting that week and that he was part of that, because I don't know anyone else who could have pulled it off as well as him, because he's just so likable anyway. And also you could see him work through it and figure out how to make it not only realistic, but funny. And so that was one of those sketches where kind of all the stars aligned at once, and I'm so grateful it happened when it did.
Great. And you said that's one of the, would you say that's the skit you're most proud of, or one of the?
Yeah. I mean, if I had to say it's probably that, maybe the race draft on Chappelle.
List some others. I know you're very modest, and I know SNL is a very collaborative. We're not saying that you single-handedly wrote these sketches or came up with them, but just name out some of the ones you're most proud of to be involved with.
Sure. I mean, this is not going to sound modest. I really have gotten so, I've been there 16 years. I've gotten so much, so there's some that I just personally like.
Yeah. Tell
There
us.
was one we did this fall that I wrote with Chris Red, where it's called "Stroll into the Polls,"
Yes.
where they all it was like a music video, and they all were strolling to the polls, and John Mulaney was a guy who kept stopping them and telling them to go. It was like for black voters, and it was based on this whisper song that was kind of funky, which I loved. I've been wanting to do something with that whisper song for a long time in the video. And I have been working more and more with Chris Red, and that was one of the things that we got on that both of us just loved. So that recently was one. There's one that I wrote with Cecily. Oh, and another thing, Janine Pirro with Cecily Strong. I write a bunch of stuff with Cecily, and that's fun. That's one where I just knew Cecily would be good at that, and so I approached her with that, and we sat down and wrote it, and she was, she just knocked it out of the park because of who she, the kind of performer she is. And I'm proud that that's one of the things that people know her for. And then I also wrote a thing, this is one that maybe people don't remember as much, but wrote a thing with Cecily where it was a parody of the podcast Serial, but it was for Christmas. And it was called Christmas Serial. And Cecily played the host of Serial. I've forgotten her name. But Cecily did such a great job doing that, and then they directed it super well, and we wrote that just like an episode of Serial, and it came out sounding and feeling like Serial, which was really fun. I wrote stuff with Jason Sudeikis early in my SNL time, and we used to write a sketch that's not on the internet anymore, but we used to write a sketch where four guys would sit around in a bar and kind of tell little stories that always ended in a weird turn, and then they would sing the big chorus of a song. And we used to love writing those, and they don't put them on the internet because of music rights. So right. I wish those would have a longer tail. I wrote a sketch for Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson where he played. It was the reboot of Bambi. Where it was kind of a Fast and Furious thing, where he played Bambi, who was getting revenge on the people who killed his mother. And, we had, a great film unit who made it look like a Fast and Furious movie. And it was so cool to write, fun action lines for The Rock and see him, say them. So those are at least a few.
Yeah, Bambi, one of the top 10 sketches on SNL's YouTube.
Oh,
By the way, fun fact. I'm off on a tangent here, but I did some aggregate math. I'm big into numbers. I went through YouTube views and Facebook views and tried to look at some sketches that I knew you were involved with to see what was the most popular Bryan Tucker sketch of all time. This was not a sketch you wrote. It's not a sketch you appeared in, but it's a sketch you were involved with the production of, and has garnered over what I believe, my estimate, over 200 million views. Do you know what that sketch might be? Do you have any guess?
Is it a Lonely Island sketch?
No, it's a sketch from a unaired pilot called Selected Hilarity. It's the Casanova dating service sketch from our good friend Scott Brown. And if you've ever seen, if you're one of the 200 plus million people who have seen the sketch of the young man sitting in the chair doing the video dating thing, and he gets a little flustered and falls out of his chair. Right. That was an STV sketch, and there's one copy on one particular video on Facebook now that's been viewed over 95 million times. But
good gosh,
alone. But the iterations over the year.
Does it say? I mean, clearly it doesn't say this is a Select Hilarity sketch. What it probably says is people think it's real, right?
Yes, and we have made $0 from that. So.
It's crazy. We shot that. So, Larry, you and I were, our agent had told us, if you want to get on TV, you have to shoot a pilot, and so we shot our own version of a pilot down using in Chapel Hill, using student television equipment. We shot that Casanova dating service thing in the student television offices in the student union, right?
Yes.
I'm pretty sure we did. And then I guess someone got a hold of it and then put it out on the internet as something that's real, right? And
I put it out. So, many years later.
Put it out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then
Okay.
someone ripped it off. Actually, it was huge on MySpace back in the day. Very, very big
Oh,
on
wow.
MySpace. I think it got
Yeah,
over
we were
100
big on
million
MySpace.
views there.
We were kings of MySpace.
Yeah, we ruled MySpace. But we're getting a
Well, I
lot of
can't.
questions.
I mean,
Yeah, we're getting some questions about the pandemic, and just to catch everybody up here, we're planning to go today till about no later than 9:30. We're almost at 9 o'clock now, so I'm trying to sort of work the questions in as we talk as best I can. We're getting some questions about the pandemic and different things. And back early in the about a year ago, back in March and April, when things were getting bad in New York, the SNL cast and crew sort of went all over the country, went their separate ways, and you found yourself living for the first time since 1997 back in Chapel Hill. How was that?
well, first I lived in Durham, North Carolina, with my wife's parents.
We'll call it the triangle. How about
Yeah, I lived there for a few months, and then yeah, we decided because of I have a wife and two kids, and we decided that things were kind of uncertain, and New York was not doing very well in March and April at all, and we were worried that our kids might not be able to go back to school in New York, and we thought about buying a house down in Chapel Hill, so we bought a house down in Chapel Hill that we still have. That I think we'll probably use as our retirement, but right now it's a second home. And we spent most of the summer and a decent amount of the fall down there. And I worked on SNL from my home in Durham and Chapel Hill.
Yeah, you wrote some sketches there that aired
Yeah,
from remotely. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And one of the questions that several people ask, we got a question from Katie Nelson, the class of '03, ahead of the presentation tonight. Well, actually, that was a different question. Let's see. Blair Rayner actually asked, how are you able to find comedic and creative inspiration in that work from home environment, especially you with your kids and living with your in-laws, and that particular time I'm sure was difficult. How did you pull it off? And someone else, Donna O'Quinn, our friend from back in the day, asked,
Yeah.
just how do you write? How do you go through the process, especially in that situation where you're not at your office, you're not around other funny people, you're not collaborating? How do you just sit down and write?
Well, first of all, hi Donna. She's a friend from STV days. Um, uh, it's a good question. It just takes a lot of practice, mostly I would say, because I've been right. We've had an SNL show. We've had 20 SNL shows a year for the past 16 years. I've always had to write something. And so, you get in that groove and you practice and you just kind of figure it out. And, there are definitely weeks where I don't have great ideas and I don't feel very funny. And often what I do is I collaborate with someone else. I talk to someone else. And even when I was down in Durham or Chapel Hill, I was kind of collaborating, where I would text Keenan and be like, do you have any ideas this week, or what might be fun? Or I text Alex Moffat, and so I mean, it's definitely a muscle that you can strengthen by practicing and doing more and more. And I would say I've gotten to the point where I can, if you tell me you have to write a sketch by tomorrow, I can definitely do that. The hard part is making it, inspired, interesting, different. I can write a version of a sketch that I wrote, 100 times. It's still kind of the kind of thing I write. The hard part is to kind of get out of yourself and write something, unusual and different. And often that happens because I'm collaborating with someone else who doesn't have the same sensibility as me.
Yeah, and do you actually do you try to go in a quiet room by yourself with your laptop and just open it up and just keep
I actually
regular
think
hours? Yeah.
to me, that's a terrible way. Everybody has their own process, but to me,
Hmm.
that's a terrible way to write and come up with ideas. Is just to open up your laptop and stare at a blank screen and a blinking cursor. Um, Almost always, my ideas come when I'm doing something else that's not too mentally taxing. That Where I have time to think, where I'm not staring at a screen, where I'm not staring at my laptop or my phone or the TV, where I'm doing something like walking or cooking or driving or, Sometimes I'll run, taking a shower, things that I am occupied in some way, but my mind is not occupied, and it kind of frees me up. Almost always, that's at least where the initial thought comes. Often when I'm about to go to sleep, or when I'm just kind of stirring in the morning, that's the best time to at least have ideas. And what I'll do is I'll have the idea, I'll kind of say a few little notes about it into my phone. I have a notes app on my phone, and I'll say a few, and then when I have to write an idea, I'll look at that notes app and be like, okay, maybe there's something there. Sometimes I get super excited about an idea and just end up writing the whole thing, but especially if it's an SNL week. But mostly, to just come up with the idea, it involves, not having to sit down. It involves getting away. The sit down part comes when you're actually taking the idea and turning it into a script.
Yeah. A lot of discipline and a lot of just the physical act of writing.
Yeah. Which also is, super hard, especially if there's no deadline. Deadlines help enormously.
Yes. They do.
If you just have to write, if you're like, I'm going to write a spec script, but I don't know who's going to read it, it's just hard to do. So.
Absolutely. Well, I know we're getting a lot of questions about, SNL, the process, auditioning, submitting scripts, how you climb the ladder. Let's just recap a little bit, because I've sort of indirectly led you down certain paths. And just to recap a little bit of your career quickly, you went to Carolina, you studied broadcast journalism, got involved with student television, toured around you started as a stand-up, did some improv, some sketch comedy, went back to stand-up, moved to New York, did stand-up for 2 years, made a lot of contacts, submitting scripts the whole time, got on Chris Rock. From there, you got on to Mad TV very briefly, then Colin Quinn, Tough Travel Colin Quinn, and then from there you were submitting to Chapelle Show, which helped solidify you. Then you started SNL as I guess you came in as a staff writer. Would you say you started kind of at the bottom? Is that fair to say?
For a writer, I started at the bottom. Yeah, you start out as a staff writer, and then in 2009, I got moved up to supervising writer. Yeah, supervising writer. And then you get to be in the meeting with Lauren and help, or at least be part of, when the sketches are picked, and you're part of casting and stuff like that. And then later I got moved up to head writer or co-head writer with another guy. And then in the last 3 years, I have moved on to a thing called senior writer, where I'm letting the other people, do all the hard head writer stuff. And I'm just, I've taken a little bit of a step back, and I'm writing less and not staying there as late. SNL it's a tough gig. On Tuesday night is our writing night, and you get there in a non-COVID times. You get to the building at 1 p.m. or so, noon, 1 p.m. And certainly when I was co-head writer, I was staying there till the next day between 6 and 10 a.m. And doing that every week.
And you had kids.
And I had kids, yeah. So, yeah, tough. I remember when I was, my goal used to be to get home before they went to school. If I could see them before they went to school in the morning, then that was a success. So I'm glad to have taken a little bit of a step back, and now I submit maybe between 1 and 3 sketches a week, maybe, which is not a lot, maybe 2, and so. And I, on those hard Tuesday nights, I rarely stay up past 2 a.m.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of people want to know some sort of secret back door or insider tip on how to get in. But the truth is your career has been a steady climb, and you're continuing to climb as you branch out into primetime television. But it's from the time you started doing stand-up regularly at Carolina, to SNL was 15 years, from 1990 to 2005, and it's been another 15. You're in your 16th season now. So how did you become head writer at SNL? It was a lot of small steps, and it wasn't one thing that led you there. It was just a lot of hard work, a lot of working your way up the ladder. And I was actually curious because people were asking. I think a lot of younger people want to go from college right in there. And I looked up the ages of all the featured players today, and it looks like the average age is 30. So it's not people right out of college. You're finding that's another question. How do you find people? And you mentioned you had a hand in scouting them. Tell us about that.
Yeah. I mean, we have a whole talent department, whose job is to book the host and the band, but their, year-round job is to find talent. And what they do is they mainly go to some of, the comedy improv theaters around the country, the big ones like Second City in Chicago or the Groundling in LA, but also like even, smaller theaters in Austin, Texas, or, Toronto, or things like that. And then also if someone's kind of big on the internet, or if they get recommendations from a writer or a cast member, the talent people will look at them. The people come now from all sorts of ways, but for the most part, to be at the level where you have a shot to really audition for SNL, almost always you have been doing it for a while and you've gained enough of a reputation that someone at NBC knows who you are already. There are a few exceptions, like, Pete Davidson was only doing stand up for like 2 or 3 years, and he started when he was 15. He'd only been doing stand up for 2 or 3 years when he got SNL. But he was doing New York clubs and playing at the Comedy Cellar and Stand Up New York and stuff like that. Like even when he was in high school and 1 year out of high school. And also he got lucky, and he got recommended by some people on SNL, and Fred Armisen and Bill Hader really liked him. Pete had a very small role in that Amy Schumer movie that Bill was in, and he got to know Bill through that. And Bill recommended him to Lorne Michaels to audition, and so it's being around enough to make those connections that lead to bigger things.
Absolutely. And putting in the years and years of work. You were 33 when you started at SNL, so
Yeah.
it's I think it's people like to fixate on the young success stories, but the truth of the matter is most people have been at it for a while, and mostly in probably New York or Chicago or LA, would you say?
Yeah,
Yeah.
most. I would say maybe like us, they didn't start in New York and
Right.
Chicago and LA, and they maybe had some decent success in the places where they're from, but almost always where the SNL people got to see them and know them was in New York, LA, Chicago. Those are the three main places. SNL people, like I said, they will fly down to Austin, or maybe some of these comedy festivals in like South Carolina, or something like that. But for the most part, it's those main places. And I tell people, people like ask me like, if I want to do comedy, do I have to move to LA or do I have to move to New York? And I think the answer is you can definitely make a good living, well, at least a living doing comedy in other places, and sometimes a good living if you tour around and do it online and stuff like that. But if you want to be on television and have people in TV know you, then you probably need to be in those one of those two places.
So I should move out of Durham.
I mean, give it a couple years,
Okay.
see what
All right.
happens. Yeah, maybe when you're 60.
Okay. Okay. I'm gonna make it. I'm gonna make it. I know I will.
All right.
Uh,
Yeah, I
some
mean,
people want the.
you and I had kind of, we had different hats where we were
Yeah.
both in the same group together. I really wanted to live in New York, but you did not. But you make a living doing comedy, and you know, from where you are in I guess your address is Cary, or
I live in Durham now, but I'm moving to Cary. Yes.
yeah, okay.
I'm doing all right.
Yeah. So you've been in Durham and Cary, like, all your life. Well, not all your life, but, in North Carolina all your life. And you've made a successful, career doing comedy, touring around, and doing, I know you have a lot of other, projects, like, you do award shows for corporate events and stuff like that. And so, yes, there is, Larry is an example that you can make a living being creative and doing what you like. But if you want to be on TV, which I wanted to do, I wanted to write sketch. I wanted to write for a television show. So I moved to New York and eventually, got to do that.
All right, we're going to take some celebrity questions here. People like to know the good insider stuff. Have you been starstruck recently? I've got to let my cat out. Think about that. She's clawing at the door.
Yeah, no problem. I can't, because of SNL, we get to meet a lot of people. I got to say hi to Hillary Clinton. I got to say hi to Barack Obama. Like I said, I work directly with Tom Hanks. So, you always have to put on your professional cap, and you can't run up and be a fan. And so I've trained myself to not be starstruck. But I think sometimes with athletes, I am like, when Chappelle hosted, not this past fall, but in 2016, or when Eddie Murphy, oh, well, yeah, that's one. Eddie Murphy, I was definitely starstruck when he hosted. And then when he hosted, like everybody came. And so like, I got to see like, Kanye and Kim Kardashian were there, and LeBron James, and so that was a little where you would kind of walk through the halls and see people who were waiting for Eddie after the show, and I was definitely starstruck that night. I also worked on the SNL 40th anniversary, which was the most stars I've ever seen in my whole life.
And you've been to the Emmys many times.
And I've been to the Emmys. Yeah, that's a little different because you're not, you're kind of with your own little group, and then you go sit at the table with your own little group. You could come up to somebody and say hello, but mostly you're not intermingling like you are at SNL. I'll tell, you may have heard a version of this story about the SNL 40th anniversary party, but this is a fun celeb story. So every celeb is at the SNL 40th anniversary, and they have a big party at the Plaza Hotel, and after it's all done, and everybody is there. And I'm lucky enough, I got to work on the show, and so I'm lucky enough to come and be part of it. And then they just put a microphone up on stage, and a few mics, and instruments and stuff, and they didn't have any plans. So I forgot who the first one was. It might have been the ladies in Haim came up and started singing. And then Taylor Swift came up and started singing. And then Paul McCartney came up and joined Taylor Swift. And then Bill Murray got up and was on harmonica. And by the end, we had, a huge band up there with, again, Paul McCartney, Taylor Swift, gosh, I'll have to look. But what happened at different people came up all night, and you would just sit there and watch, and they would just come up on stage and just, do a song together and have fun. And then at the very end of the night, Prince came up, and he kind of made his way through the crowd, and he did like 4 songs and just blew the roof off. And like, there's up on stage is like, Chris Rock and Paul McCartney, Taylor Swift, the SNL band backing them. And I have a picture of it somewhere on my phone. I probably don't have time to go and find it, but I ought to show you guys. But I was 30 feet from that stage, just watching all that happen. And I have a feeling that a night like that is never going to happen again in my whole life.
Was that the most memorable night at SNL, or maybe of your whole life? Not besides being married and your kids and all that.
Right. That was way up there. When Eddie Murphy hosted, that was really special for me. Oh, that's another sketch I would be very proud of, is I got to, I co-wrote the Mr. Robinson's Neighborhood.
Wow.
Murphy did when he hosted. And, I talked earlier when we talked in the night about, Eddie was so formative for me because I was a kid of the 80s, and like, he was the coolest guy, when I was growing up. and kind of he symbolized what comedy was for me. And so when he came back, on my 14th or 15th year there, not only did I get to meet him and hang out with him, which was awesome, but I got to write a couple sketches for him. And one of them was a Mr. Robinson's Neighborhood, which I wrote with a writer named Streeter Seidel. And that was awesome. So
Great.
I should have sent you guys some photos. Now I'm thinking, because I have photos of all this stuff.
We'll do this again.
It'd be fun to share. Huh?
We'll do this again.
Yeah.
So, Alec Baldwin has said he's done with Trump. Is he done with Trump? Will we see Trump again on SNL?
I don't know. He kind of said he was done with Trump a year ago.
Yeah.
Back and kind of did Trump. I don't think he was super happy about doing Trump, but kind of I think he looks at it as almost like a service, like being called into duty. By the third and fourth year of Trump's administration, I think Alec was not necessarily enjoying playing Donald Trump, and was public about that. But when we needed him, he would often come. It just became fewer and fewer. I have a feeling that he would be okay with playing Trump if there was the right kind of sketch, and he knew that it wasn't something he would have to do week after week after week, which is probably, now that we have a new president, is probably the case.
Yes. Our good friend Philip Brown asked a great question. During the Trump era, how many times did you have to rewrite a sketch at the very last minute, or rewrite a show because of current events that happened, the day of or the day before?
All the time. Hello, Phil. That's another fun STV friend who's here. Yeah, all the time. It used to be that, especially in the Bush and Obama administrations, we would write the cold open to the show, at least some version of it, on Tuesday for the show on Saturday. And then once the Trump era started, it was almost always written on Thursday night, real late, or often even Friday night at like midnight. And Colin Jost, who writes most of those now, at least these past 2 years, he has written a couple of them that he didn't turn in until Saturday at like 2 p.m. So it's the new normal with the Trump administration has been that we decide what it is on Thursday. A version of it is written, well, on Thursday or Friday. A version of it is written by Friday night, and then on Saturday afternoon, we all sit around, read it out loud, and try to improve it and punch it up.
So you're telling me for over 41 years, the cold open was started typically on Tuesday, and due to Trump, you didn't even bother to start until Thursday. Is that what you're saying?
That's mostly what I'm saying. Although there were, yes, there were cold opens, that were written. A lot of cold opens were written on like Thursday, later, but especially if something big happened. But I don't know. Another thing that people maybe some people remember is often SNL would not start with something political or something in the news. They might start with Kristen Wiig with her Tiny Hands character, or so many SNL in the 80s started with Wayne's World. So only in maybe the last 5 to 6 years has SNL absolutely started with stuff that's going on in the news.
Roger wants to know, are you going to go easy on Joe and Kamala?
No. Our job is to poke fun at people, and we're going to try our best to do that. I think Trump was such a character that, frankly, was often, I guess for lack of a better word, kind of asking for it with his attitude, and always was an antagonist, and openly said he did not care for SNL. That I think, there was a little bit of bad blood there. But, our job is to make fun of whoever is in power, and we're going to do that. I would say, if you just look at the Democratic primary and stuff like that, with Jim Carrey playing Biden, or even Woody Harrelson playing Biden or Jason Sudeikis playing Biden, which we did in the spring. We're definitely making fun of Biden. Maybe it's not at the constant, maybe it's not at the level that we have been poking fun at Trump, but we understand that our job is not to elevate someone, but to make fun of them.
Great. Well, this has been good. I'm going to start to wrap it up a little bit. I'm going to end it up on a little bit of a sappy note here. There were a lot of questions about, how do you make it? How do you get started? How do you get on SNL and all these questions? And I want to give a shout out to someone who may or may not be watching, and that is your wife, Rachel Tucker, one of the smartest and most successful people I know. I would say in her field. It's hard to compare the two, but she's as successful as you. Would you say that? Maybe more successful, very successful in her career.
Yeah.
And
very successful in a different way, but yeah.
In a different way, yes. In her career, I would say if you're out there and you're wanting to make it in this business, one of the things you can do is find a partner, find a friend, find someone who supports you unconditionally. And I know Rachel has been a huge support for you. So give her a shout out and say something nice about Rachel. And also the two of you started a scholarship at UNC, which we should touch on. That'll be a nice way to wrap all this up. Talk about Rachel, talk about your scholarship, and just give a little bit of shout out to Chapel Hill, UNC and the School of Journalism to wrap it up.
Sure. And that's really nice of you to say that about her. I know she would appreciate it. I hope she's watching. We decided to go into different rooms here. She is in this New York apartment with me somewhere. Yeah, I mean, that is an underrated aspect, I think, of a lot of successful people, is they have someone supporting them. And, I've been very lucky to have Rachel. She and I moved to New York together in, fall of '97. Well, we moved separately, but at about the same time. She always was, if I bombed at, an open mic or I wasn't doing well, she always would, tell me that I was funny and tell me that she believed in me, and she was working back then as, a pretty successful in finance, I think at Merrill Lynch. And she was making all the money and I was just a temp, and she still was, with me because she believed in me. And so, because she believed in me, it helped me believe in myself. And then when I started SNL, I started 2 weeks I started at SNL. My first day at SNL was about 2 or 3 weeks after we had our second child. And so poor Rachel had to not only do a full-time job, but stay home, with the kid and with 2 kids. And, she would call me up and she would be having a very hard time, and I would feel terrible, but she would say, no, this is a great job, and, stay, do your stuff. She was always super supportive. And so, and she has been, through the whole thing. So it's, Rachel works at Moody's now. She's worked at Moody's for like 17 years. And she is the chief of staff to, I always get this wrong, but she's chief of staff to the, I don't want to say the CEO, but the CRO. Moody's is in 2 groups, and she's chief of staff to one of the heads of the 2 groups.
She's a big deal.
She's a big deal. She knows what's going on. So, and then, we started a scholarship. I know also the New York Carolina Club has a scholarship, which maybe if you're going to donate to a scholarship, donate to that tonight, because they're the ones hosting us. But yeah, we started a scholarship in the journalism school for, I guess it goes to 2 different students every year. And we've been really pleased with that. We get to meet those people who get the scholarship, and it's kind of nice to, see them and their progress.
Well, great. Well, Bryan, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us. You are a testament to hard work. you're a testament to working your way up in show business. There's a stereotype, I think, that SNL's cutthroat and very hostile environment. A lot of people have said that over the years, but you're a guy, a nice guy. I think it's very clear that you're mostly modest and don't like to brag about to yourself too much, but you're a testament that good guys can go far. You're still climbing up the ladder. You've got some great things coming up with the Keenan show and all the other stuff you have going on. So a real inspiration to everyone watching. Thank you, New York Carolina Club. Hopefully, I think John's going to come back and say a few words to close us out. Thank you for having us.
Well, thanks, Larry, and thanks for doing this. Like, if you guys tuned in to at the very beginning, they asked me who I wanted to have host this, and I said Larry, not only because he's super good at these kind of things, but he's been my friend for 30 years, and we started together, and so thank you, Larry, for being part of it.
Thank you, John. You're on.
What a great conversation. We are so grateful to both of you, Bryan and Larry. We're so proud of you all being part of the Carolina family. And this was just a joy. And I hope next time we can do this live.
Yeah, me too.
We're all virtual, and we couldn't even have our arts brunch or our fall cocktail parties, admitted student receptions. Everything's in the deep freeze. But to better times, which I think started yesterday, and there's a Carolina spirit. We're all over this country, and it was great that we've had some of you tonight are from all sorts of places, but part of the Carolina family. So thank you, everyone, and to better days.
Better days.
Thank you.